Hello, you Larp watchers, and welcome back to the channel. I'm joined by two of my favourite people from Empire LRP. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
After you.
I'm Katherine. I've been doing Empire for 6 events now.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I've just started my second year at Empire.
So what we wanted to do was talk about the characters we play at Empire for a bit, how we made them, what we were thinking, and some of the choices we made behind that character. So, sorry. I'll start because I play the most important character here.
Clearly.
The most important. So we all are part of the same nation, which is called Dawn.
What?
And they're two of us. Dawn is kind of Knight's Tale-esque.
Very Arthurian, very romantic, very colourful.
Swords and armour and
Glorious.
glory.
That's the
Glorious,
key word.
if one wanted to sum it up in one word.
Definitely. So my character, when I'm creating a character, I don't know if you guys go about it the same way. I start with their history, so their background and what they were like, where they're from, what their parents are like, and then that will give me a much better idea of the character, because it's an important part of anyone's life, but if you can nail down that, you can then nail the character. So Clarence, I started with where he was from, what his upbringing was like, what his parents were like, and then getting that, then everything else kind of slowly fell into place. So he was originally from Werewater, and in Dawn, one of the reasons I really like it is they don't, it's not birthright, what's the word?
It's earned, not...
Yes.
Yeah. Nobility is earned, not...
So you could be the son of the king, and that means absolutely nothing. So Clarence, his father was a swordmaster style, strict, and Clarence trained with him and went down that road as well. And then he always put his Earl first, I decided. If there was ever a choice of a decision he would have to make, he would always put his Earl first. So his leader, his lord, would always be the top priority. Yeah. And we've missed one key thing about Dawn, and that's a big part of it, is it's a 2-tier structure. So the society isn't like it is now, where there's just kind of, it's hard to explain, so like working class, middle class and upper class. Not that there's the class system, but there's a test system and a house system. So if you want to join one of the big noble houses, you have to pass a test to join them. If they don't want you to join them, they set an impossible test. And there's some good examples of that in the history of the nation. But if they do want you, they don't want to set an easy test, because you'll be remembered for passing that test. And a lot of people then get names off that test as well, of how they managed to succeed or win it, which is, I think, quite a nice touch.
Yeah.
So Clarence's test was to protect somebody else without them realising he was doing it. So his old Earl's daughter had a diplomatic test of mettle, and Clarence had his at the same time to get her from point A to point B all the way across the Empire, without her realising he was there, and to keep her safe. So that kind of summed up the sort of person he was.
And passing that test is what gives you nobility.
Yes,
yeah.
And then that made Clarence a noble. Other things with him, I decided with the test system, not everyone wants to do it, and not everyone feels the need to do it. So Clarence's first love, I wrote into his background that they were together and he became a noble, and she said, "It's not for me, I don't want to do it." And he was like, "Oh."
And in Dawn, a noble and a yeofolk, as they're called, cannot legally be married and even being in a relationship with them is very much looked down upon.
So Clarence, being the type of character he was and is, said, okay, I love you to bits and etc, but I'm now moving forwards. And then that got me thinking, what sort of person would he be? So Dawn is very much militaristic, glorious, it's got the most armies out of everyone in the Empire, it's never lost a territory, it's got a big history of that. And I was chatting to my brother-in-law, who is a history lecturer, about War of the Roses and how a lot of these knights and nobles came back from that completely shell-shocked. Post-traumatic stress, they were just in a different world afterwards. How would someone return from constantly going off to war and returning and then having to go into ballrooms and be in the high society and then going off to war again and fighting in that kind of style? They probably wouldn't be all there.
No.
So much, no.
As much as they'd like to be.
Yeah, so that's where I kind of got the sort of background for Clarence. Another key part of Clarence's history, which really kind of cemented the character for me, when I was writing him, he got married to another noble for the good of the house and for the good of him, and his Earl got caught out in a trap by their enemy, the Druge. Ooh, those evil, sneaky Druge. And he had a choice, basically, to come back and save his wife, who was a noble, or to save his Earl. And of course he saved his Earl. He went for his Earl and ended up saving her. So when I wrote and came up with the background for Clarence, I never really expected anyone to come in as these characters or various bits to do. But in the game now, there's someone who plays his daughter from his first love, and she plays it brilliantly, and just turned...
He's a granddad as well, isn't he?
He's a granddad now, which is terrifying. Poor Clarence.
He can't look after himself.
He can barely look after himself. He isn't... Yeah. So, in losing his wife, him and his brothers, where they were other players, all set about trying to save the people they lost and bring back all of these just people written into the history, trying to bring them back. And they did it for a number of years, which was the reason they hadn't been in the Empire. And then when they finally returned to the Empire, it was because they'd given up their last hope and said, we can't do it.
They must all be dead.
They must all be dead. We can't find
All
them.
of them.
Or are they?
We've spent a number of years looking.
A number.
Yeah, it was like 7 or 8 years. So then the other characters who came in as my brothers, one came in straight away as his sort of good brother Marshall, and they were like best friends, and those are great characters.
Clarence and Marshall.
Clarence and Marshall. I really miss... Marshall was played by Sean, who, went and bought a house and got an expensive girlfriend. I think fiance now, I shouldn't really say that. Sorry Sean, sorry. So he can't make it so much anymore, which is a real shame. And then later on they were joined by his other brother Edward, who was really badly messed up from constantly going off to war and coming back. So I try not to sort of focus on that part of him too much, but I use it as an excuse for him to be a bit whatever. Because it's...
Yeah. Clarence is definitely a bit whatever.
Yeah. I like to play incompetent-ish characters, but for there to be a reason why they're incompetent.
Yeah. He's the best way to sum up Clarence is he's a bit of a buffoon, isn't he?
Yes,
he's bumbling about, but he's good when it matters.
Yes, his heart is most definitely at the right place.
Yeah. So take aspects of my personality and either push them up a little bit or flip them completely. So I'm quite a cynical person-ish. And so Clarence is the complete opposite. There is no cynicism in him at all. Is that the right word? No, he's not cynical at all.
No.
So he just takes everything as he's
Takes
borderline
everything off his
gullible.
Yeah.
Face value. This is what they mean. This is what it is. And it's fun to roleplay that character. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and you get to drink a lot of red wine
Yeah,
as well.
he's trying not to drink so
No,
much.
I saw him on the juice at the weekend, actually.
The juice.
Yes, I
Oh,
did.
juice.
Yeah.
He's realised it was one of the reasons messing him up a bit was that he would drink
Too much red.
Too much red. So it wouldn't be uncommon for me at an Empire event to drink a considerable amount of red wine. A considerable amount.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you don't realise how much you're drinking.
Because it's such a social aspect of the game. You go into somebody's tent and they offer you a glass of wine and you take it. And then you go to somebody else's tent and they offer you a glass of wine. And then before you know it, you are 5 or 6 glasses of wine down. And it's 11 o'clock in the morning.
Or the Nation's Bar has just had a delivery of jelly vodka shots. That particular event, like I had a good 3 of those in a row.
Brilliant. Anyway, back to Clarence.
The most important character.
Yeah, most important
He
character.
is the Earl.
He is the Earl.
So when I make a character, I try to make it so it will be fun for me to play it, so I enjoy playing it, but also be fun for other people around that character. So on the battlefield, I make him, believe it or not, I'm a better swordsman than Clarence. I know it's hard to believe. I purposefully get hit a lot. I turn my back to enemies. If you've seen any of the headcam stuff, he'll just turn around.
Running headlong into shield walls with no support.
Charging, I love charging.
Exactly. And I play that on purpose to put people into danger.
To cause the physics a great amount of stress.
Exactly.
Yes.
A part of his kind of bumblingness, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
It's good to give, when I make a character, I give them a couple of keywords so I can kind of remember what their kind of moral duty or what they would believe in or what they would stand for in my head. So once I can kind of click into that kind of way of thinking. So with Clarence it was... Loyal buffoon, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guard in my head, so he would always protect people, whether they needed it or not. What was the other? I gave him one more good one. I'm useless. That will come to me while you're doing your characters, and I'll think.
See, you said key phrases and key words, and all I thought was his best catchphrase ever. What does Clarence call people?
Obeen. That's mainly because I'm not very good with names.
That's the best. That's the thing. If you've got something that you can just call people, but if it's a lord or a lady, you can just go, "Oh, my lord," or "a lady."
It helps a great deal.
If you forget everyone's name, because there are a lot of people with a lot of complicated names.
And an old bean inspired anti-Clarence in the Monster Crew.
Oh, jeez, let's not go there. For a while, I wanted to move him into sort of the military game, but then I did it and I hated it, and I stepped him down. I led Dawn for, I can't remember how many events, quite a few, 5 or 6, which was good fun on the battlefield, but then did a lot less fighting, so now it's more fun to just kind of be in our unit.
Yeah. I do like our unit.
Yes.
We get into a lot of fun, and it's just the right level of mischief and cautiousness. I'd like a little bit more mischief.
you got to go tell Tristan that, because Tristan's the one who's like, "Oh no, come back."
Let's be safe.
Haldane as well.
Yeah,
Haldane is very cautious. Yes.
So it's that kind of mix of characters. But ultimately with Clarence, which is a bizarre thing, which I don't really want to talk about too much in this one, is I play to lose on him. Completely play to lose. If ever there was a one-on-one important tournament fight, I would do my best to make it look like I'm going to win, and then everything's going well, and then he loses for some reason.
Because it doesn't make it fun to win all the time, because that's not what life is.
And LARP, at least in my opinion, is very much, a game of storytelling and of characters rather than a game that you play to win. Yeah.
Yes. I think if he was a character in a film, I'd want, or a book, I think it'd be the kind of, not the quest giver, but the supporter who you could rely on.
The Ron Weasley.
Yeah.
There you go. Ron Weasley. He's funny, he's reliable.
Yeah, that's
a little bit bumbling.
A little bit bumbling.
And Jocelyn was always the Hermione, so that makes
there
sense.
You go.
Yeah.
You know when the shit hits the fan, he's going to be stood behind you, not complaining, just a little nod.
Yeah.
And then that's that. Yeah, I like that character. I get tired of him sometimes, and you guys do a fantastic job of making me fall in love with him again, which has been nice. But yeah, that's him. I like him.
He's a great character to interact with.
Yes.
I want him to die in a really bad way.
Oh no.
Like a useless way.
Slipped and fell in the bar, landed on the floor.
Set his cloak on fire.
Yeah, like, obviously I do. He's going to like turn his ways around and then something bad.
He's going to go to the wrong shield wall.
Oh,
He'll turn around and he's like, right, let's go! And he's suddenly surrounded by
no,
George.
he like puts his neck out on the line for someone else and trusts them completely.
Oh,
and then they like
heartbreaking.
backstab him, and then the realisation of what's just happened. Yeah. Yes.
It's just because I'm not around to look after you anymore.
That would be a good way for him to go. I'd be happy if he died like that.
Yeah.
But that's Clarence.
Do you want me to go next?
Segue on to...
We'll go from the most important character to the...
Oh, yeah. Wait, is this a scale?
Yeah.
Wow.
If this was a scale, I'd be right over.
Nice.
So, my character, was, I should say, she met a somewhat untimely end at the weekend.
Spoilers!
Lady Jocelyn Arwood, who then sort of segued into Lady Jocelyn Cordraco, was actually one of the characters from Adam's backstory, from Clarence's backstory. She was the second, or the first wife, the second love, who got taken by the nasty Druge when you decided that your Earl was more important.
Yes,
For some reason.
And rightly so, and Clarence. He wouldn't change that for the world, I don't think.
Great. So I think I am the only one of the three at the table for whom Empire was my very first LARP experience. I was brought into it by a friend who actually also played in Dawn at the time and played in the same group as us. We'd done a lot of other forms of roleplay together, so text-based mainly, and she was encouraging me to give LARP a go. And when I wasn't really sure what to do, I wasn't sure where to begin. If you've ever been on the Empire website, it is an absolute minefield.
It's really overwhelming.
If you've never LARPed before and you're just faced with that wiki, I had absolutely no idea where to begin. So I spoke with my friend, and she actually said that one of her friends was looking for a particular character from his backstory, and would I be interested in that? So that was very much my starting point, was already having a bit of my background written for me through stuff that had already happened in play. And
it's good to have a link.
Yes, and especially I think if you're new, the more links you can have. It definitely made me more confident to go in knowing that there were people who would know my character.
It gives you a reason to be there. So if you don't create a good background for your character, and someone says, how do you feel about this? It becomes very complicated to go, well...
Dunno.
Yeah.
Dunno. I don't feel about this.
Especially if it's like a quite prevalent issue as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jocelyn for me started off very much as, you are this character's wife, you have been missing for a long time, taken by the nasty Druge. For me, I think rather than starting with the backstory, I started very much with a sense of who she was in terms of personality traits and character, and I very much wanted her to be sort of the yin to Clarence's yang. So I spoke to you quite a bit about what Clarence was like, and I spoke to other people about what Clarence was like, and tried to flip as much of that as I could on my head. So Jocelyn was always going to be someone who was very, very sensible and cautious and quite untrustworthy of other people, and the exact opposite of gullible.
Untrustworthy or untrusting?
Untrusting. Untrusting. She was going to be very, very much the kind of person who would question everything, who would be seeking advice before she made any decisions. She was quite quiet. She was very much someone who would be sort of sat to the side in a conversation, but would be listening, always listening, and trying to steer people she cares about in the right way. So, you know, as Adam was saying, Clarence is the kind of person who would just listen to something and say, oh yes, that's great, that sounds like a good idea. She'd be the person going,
darling, no.
Exactly, hang on a second, are you sure about this?
Or Clarence wouldn't be listening at all. It's a fine skill to actually listen to the conversation, but then have your character not listen to it at all. And then when you've got to time the sort of bumbling idiot at exactly the right moment.
Yes. And then from knowing that about her, what her core personality was going to be, I sort of took that backwards and tried to work out who she was, you know, as a younger person that would have turned her into this character who is coming into the field. So because I knew that she was always going to be very set in her ways, quite stubborn, she doesn't really like to take no for an answer. She always has this idea of what she wants, and it's quite strong-willed in trying to get that. I wrote that right into her very, very early backstory. So her entire backstory revolved around the fact that she was from this very, very martial house in Dawn. Both her parents were soldiers, her brother and sister were soldiers. Everything in this house was to do with being a soldier. It's about putting on your armour, picking up your sword and going and fighting.
Oh, makes the death even worse now. All of the stab, it's your sword bit.
Yeah, you screwed up that. And Dawn is very much a nation, I think, of competition, but not always martial, but there is very much this feeling, I think, of a lot of people kind of default to thinking of competition as martial.
If someone wants to challenge you, it'll usually automatically fall to, we'll duel each other.
And that's kind of one of the things as well that I wanted to tackle with Jocelyn, especially as a brand new LARPer, because I'd never done LARP fighting before. I didn't know how I'd take to it. I didn't know whether I'd be any good at it. I didn't want to come in as a character who was very martial, because it would be weird if I then couldn't work out which end of the sword to hold. Thankfully that didn't hold true. Apparently I'm actually okay at it, but I didn't know that at the time when I was creating a character.
That's a good idea. It's pointless to say that they're the champion of so-and-so if you haven't got the hard skills to back it up.
So don't play a mighty hero, be a hero and be mighty. Right. Don't talk the talk if you can't walk the walk.
Yes.
So Jocelyn's kind of backstory was around the fact that she had this very, very martial family, and she was the youngest child by quite some way, so she saw both her siblings growing up before her, learning to fight, taking their tests of mettle, going off to war, and you know, she was waiting for her turn, and she was really keen.
What was her test? Sorry, what was her test?
We'll get there.
Sorry.
You'll remember when I say. And then it got to a point where her sister had passed her test of mettle and went off into the big wide world. And Jocelyn and her sister were incredibly close. They adored each other. And her sister was injured in battle. Indeed, she got hit with a poisoned blade. And because the house was so martial, they didn't really field any physics, and they couldn't save the sister in time. At which point, Jocelyn, being her precocious self, was like, well, this is easily avoidable. This is a house full of martial people, why don't you train me up to be a physic instead, because then we can stop this from ever happening again. Her parents said, no, don't be silly, we're a fighting house. And she stubbornly said, well, tough luck, try getting me to pick up a sword again, and went off and did her own thing, and taught herself to be a physic. She was a self-taught physic. And when she became of an age where she wanted to take her test of mettle, and she went to her parents, they told her to go with the house lance to the battlefront and survive for a year. knowing that she hadn't done any sort of battle training since she was about 9-10 years old. They assumed that would be an impossible test for her. They didn't want her to pass her test of mettle. And that's sort of been an ongoing theme, I think, with Jocelyn the whole way through, is that people tell her that she can't do something, and that just makes her...
She does it!
She's even more determined then to do it. And I think that is a bit of me, as Katherine as well, coming through. I am like that as well, that there's nothing that will get me going more than being told I can't do it, because then I'll make sure that I do it. She went off to battle for the year, and she's one for looking for loopholes. It's not the only time that this has come up for Jocelyn. The test didn't specify that she had to survive on the battlefront for a year as a soldier, so she went and became a battle physic, frontline physic, which is what she has continued to do ever since. It's what she does in the battles when we go to Empire. She goes onto the battlefield with her lance. She has swords, she has a shield. She uses them if she has to, but she is there as a physic to keep the rest of her lance alive.
Yep. How many times would you say you picked up Clarence?
Too many to count, I think.
And then we always will remember the embarrassing wound.
Oh yes, I treated you on the battlefield, didn't I?
So my character in the battlefield, somebody stabbed me. No, hit me? I can't remember. They either got stabbed or hit, and they used a call, the cleave call, but they hit me somewhere in the crotch region. And I sort of didn't know how to take it. Was it a leg hit? Was it a body hit?
That's not in the rules.
It's not in the rules. And so I just role played it as that I got hit directly in the crotch, and having to hobble up to Jocelyn and her going, oh, what is it? Is it your leg? Is it your stomach? Oh, let me have a look at it. It's like, might want to turn me around.
She was a hardened physic.
She'd seen everything.
Never once.
That'll always stick with me as one of my favourite moments with Jocelyn. That wound.
I just remember the times that she'd scream for Clarence after he'd be on the floor. He's my husband!
I fed you other physics out the way to get to you myself.
That one's mine. Get out the way.
So in their backstory, she actually met Clarence whilst on that test of metal year. You were fighting in that same battle that her house went to, and she picked you up off the floor when you were lying there screaming from some sort of injury. I think we could fairly say that Clarence screams when he's hurt. He doesn't take his injuries in a calm and...
Certain things should be shared.
And then they had the classic Dornish love story, got married. I think everything was nice and hunky-dory for a few years. And then we had the great Devereux trap that you've already spoken about, which took her away for 10 years. That's when my first empire was her having just escaped from those 10 years of slavery. We had other members of our house who had been in the Barrens, which is where all the Devereux were, in the sort of the time running up to my first event, and we planned that they were the ones who'd found me, and they brought me in to Anvil, where Empire is.
So this is a good example of Clarence failing.
Yes.
Which makes me happy.
And who wasn't at that first summit, actually, when they got brought back?
I couldn't... Oh, what was I doing?
Photography, presumably. It's normally...
I was doing wedding photos. I didn't go to wedding. Annoying. Yeah. But yeah, we did have the first meeting I really enjoyed. Our characters was really good.
That was at a winter player event.
Yeah, it was like a ball, wasn't it?
Yes, a leaguish ball.
It's just, that was a good moment.
She was so happy to see you, and then you didn't believe she was.
The one time Clarence is cynical because his heart is on the line. And
you asked me to prove that it was me.
Yeah.
So tell me something only you would know about me, or something like that. That's what you said to me. First thing you said to me.
Yeah, that was good.
And it was very useful for me as well to come in as a character who had been completely out of the Empire for 10 years, because again, that wiki is so huge. For your very first character, if you come in as a character who is meant to be, very knowledgeable in one area,
you've got to do your research.
If you go around Anvil saying, I am a priest of vigilance, or I've
been the Earl of my house for 15 years.
You will be brought into conversations where they assume you know everything about that part of the game, whereas coming in as someone who has literally done nothing but be a slave to an orc race for 10 years, I didn't get those questions.
That's good.
And it meant that I could ask questions when I didn't understand what was going on, and no one looked at me weirdly for it.
So it's coming up with your background to help with your skill set. So if you want to spend 40, 50 hours memorising the wiki and understanding it, a friend of mine for his first character basically did that, and he still does it. And he plays a super knowledgeable priest, and he plays it well. But it's a great deal of effort. If you want to play someone who doesn't do that, bumbling.
Come in as someone who doesn't know everything.
Yeah, exactly. And then as long as you know enough of your history and your background and where it's going. Well, not where it's going, but.
Somebody came in. It was actually Uther. He started talking to someone about the virtues, and he didn't know he misnamed one of them.
Oh, no.
I forget what one he messed up, and then I think the person he was talking to was a priest, and you just see them like this tension in the air. So if you are coming in as someone who knows stuff, know your stuff.
I think one of the best bits of advice I was given when I was starting and I was getting quite stressed about how much there was to know is that because Empire is such a large game...
This was a really good bit of advice.
You have to think of it as another form of a real life. Like, in your real life, do you know everything that is going on in the world of politics at the moment? Maybe, if you're really into politics, but probably you don't.
Yes.
Are you, in your real life, a very religious person? You might be. You might know everything there is to know about your religion, but you may not be. And it's exactly the same in Empire. It's a world of information, and your character does not have to be worldly wise to every element of that. Just like you in your real life probably aren't worldly wise to everything that's going on in the UK, the world at the moment.
Yeah. Because it isn't just a couple of months of information, it's not just a year of information, it's years and years of playing that has built up this history and this backstory.
Yeah. So, whilst, religion plays a very big part in the game, and it can be quite scandalous to declare yourself not religious, there are still layers of religious that you can be. So Jocelyn knew the virtues, she knew which virtue sung to her most, but she wouldn't have been able to hold a deep theological conversation with anybody. Religion wasn't her interest. She knew enough, but,
That's cool.
And because, in Dawn in particular, there's a whole culture around nobility and money, and the fact that money is seen as something very much that the yo folk, kind of like the working class, deal with. I now need to, because I'm moving to a different nation, but up to this moment I have not looked at the money pages on the wiki, because Jocelyn would never have known how money worked. She was raised by a noble house. She passed her test at a young age, then moved to Arwood, who are, I think, even less money aware than her old house. So there is absolutely no reason why she would ever have learnt how money works, so I didn't learn.
Yeah.
And things like that I find help a lot. Obviously, over time, as you have more and more characters, it becomes harder because you know stuff from previous characters.
Yeah.
But especially for the first one, if it's something your character wouldn't know or care about, I just didn't learn.
But it was really nice to have something come into play which was kind of written as a sort of open-ended in Clarence's backstory.
Yes.
And then to have someone kind of just pick a little bit and then...
I mean,
the only opened up so much more stuff.
The only brief I had to work from was, Clarence's wife, quite serious and sensible.
Yeah.
Been missing for some time.
Hadn't been married that long before you went missing.
Yeah, that was all I had. So everything else, I made that my own. And being such a new character, I think it's been really nice to see her arc. She came in very much as a physic. That was all she was interested in.
Quite scared.
Yeah, and she was terrified. And the whole way through her arc, she has been dealing with sort of issues around anxiety and panic, particularly towards orcs and
Clarence was the opposite of help in this situation. Yes. On purpose.
Our first mainline big field event together. I think you took me on an icy date night into the orc camp, didn't you?
I came back for a reason why it was really vitally important to go to the orcs. And then it was like, we'll just swing round here first, old bean. We'll just pop in to see the orcs. Good old Clarence.
And I had one hand, I think, clinging to your arm in a vice-like grip. The other one had like a dagger behind my back. With any
but that's good, because you got to bring a weapon into the orc camp.
Yes. Oh. And I think we were with Isla, your character's sister, who was the one who noticed that I think Jocelyn had gone about 3 shades paler.
And was just oblivious. Yeah. Well, I totally saw what you were doing, it was brilliant. And then Clarence was just completely oblivious to it. It was excellent.
Isla physically removed me from the orc camp, I think, before I accidentally started stabbing them in my panic. So yeah, she had this running thing throughout the entire time I've been playing her about how she's coped with, 10 years of slavery from really quite... I mean, the Druge are like the most brutal of the orc tribes.
They sort of personify the typical evil enemy. They will poison water wells, they will burn stuff down, they kill indiscriminately. And sort of the rule of thumb being, if you get caught by the Grendel, they like money, so you could probably get ransomed back to your friends and your family. If you get caught by the Jotun, maybe they've got some sense of honour, but if you get caught by the Druge, you've got a very, very slim chance of getting out of there unscathed. I think some people got caught in a skirmish last event and they tortured them and just threw them back through the gates.
They like to torture the Druge. I always had it. It never actually came up in play, but if anybody did ever ask Jocelyn how she was kept rather than killed on the spot, the answer was going to be that there was something on her at the time that made it obvious to them that she was an apothecary and she knew how to make potions. And therefore, because the Druge are so obsessed with poisons, they saw her as a commodity to help make their poisons. And that was what she was doing for those 10 years. They were torturing her to make poisons for them.
You monster.
Well, and then that's how she met her end with poison, so it all comes round in a nice circle.
Spoilers.
So, yeah, and then she came in. So, I was playing a lot with her anxiety on that front. And then her very first event, she was approached by 2 heralds of one of the Eternals called Sauron.
That's cool.
There are 6 different magical realms in Empire, which are named after the 4 seasons, so spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then also day and night. And each of those realms comes with a set of Eternals, which are, I guess, like the magical beings.
Yeah, sort of like ethereal beings.
Yeah. And they all have slightly different interests, and they take interest in what's going on in the Empire and send their heralds every now and then if they spot someone who's being particularly interesting and join them. And Sauron's obsession is with sort of suffering and...
Revenge, isn't it?
Suffering, it's sort of overcoming adversity and how you...
At any cost.
Yeah, that quite exactly.
Yeah.
And so he took quite an interest in Jocelyn because she had this very traumatic backstory of suffering, and she was back and she wanted to seek revenge or find some way of overcoming what had happened to her. And one of the things that happened with these heralds is they brought her this pestle and mortar, which was a magical item which sort of increased how many potions she could make, because a lot of her skill was in apothecary and potion making. And one of the sort of additional effects was that if she became a senator within the year, the magical properties would be even greater. She would be able to make pretty much, I think it was every potion known to the Empire.
Wow.
But only if she became a senator.
It's a beautiful example of the organisers reading the background for your character, then taking aspects of it and going, brilliant, now we can do some plot. So it's always worth, especially for Empire, if you're making a new character, to
fill in those,
fill in that backstory.
Make it a good one, because it does get read.
It does get read, and I'm sure that's why I got that plot, because I wrote loads in mine about how she would be affected by this 10 years and how she would be looking for revenge and those kind of things, which is obviously what they picked up on. So we talked about this in our group. Our Earl at the time, this was before Clarence was Earl, started questioning Jocelyn on whether senator was something she would be interested in. This was my very first event. I didn't even know what a senator did, so I was shown where the Senate was. I watched a session of Senate. the current senators at the time picked up on this, and one of them offered to let me be their proxy for a Senate session. And this was all in my first and second events. This kind of was a bit of a slow burn plot over 2 events. At which point Jocelyn was like, yeah, I could do that, and it wasn't something I was planning for her at all. All my plans were around the physics game and improving her physics skills, and also very much sort of personal plot, trying to make amends with Clarence, trying to find her place in this world that's moved on by 10 years without her. And then I got thrown this absolute curveball of, maybe you could be a senator.
That was cool.
Yeah.
It shows definitely worth
being open-minded.
And making a good background.
Yeah.
And spending... I think we should make another video about how to actually make a character, because we've all got different ideas. But it's very easy to spend more time reading the rules than the history. But it should probably be the opposite way around, big time.
Yeah.
Spend a lot more time reading the world and kind of understand the rules a bit.
Yeah. As long as you've got a general idea of like the main parts of the rules.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you don't take the mick, you're okay.
And they do provide like a breakdown of the key rules. Kind of they hand it out at the new player meet, and it's just like an A5 page of, if you hear these calls, this is what you do.
Yeah.
And their claim, which I think is perfectly true, is that if you know those, you can play the game fine.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So then, Jocelyn just went on pretty much a year-long quest to become a senator. In every nation chooses their senators slightly differently. So in Dawn, it's by grand tourney. Anyone who wishes to be a senator gathers people to support them, and then each potential candidate with their supporters enters the Glory Square, which is like our tournament ground in Dawn, and it's a fight to last man standing.
Yeah, it's a bit of a free-for-all, isn't it?
And whoever the last man standing is declares, who they were supporting.
A lot of the time people accidentally fight for the wrong team.
Accidentally? He marched over to the other team. Because it wasn't fair.
It wasn't fair. Right, should we move on?
And it took us as a house and Jocelyn as a candidate a few attempts to win, but she did win at the last event last year, so the end of 2017. So she had a full event and 3/4 of the event just gone in the Senate.
So
I just 2 events. But you only get a year before you have to restand anyway, so I like to think of it as she had half her time, which sounds slightly less depressing.
And she got her motion passed.
She did. And the Senate game is a whole video in its own right.
Oh God.
But in very basic terms, each time you meet, each senator gets one chance to ask something of the other senators which they agree on or not. So
I'm pretty sure you couldn't pay me to be a senator.
It's very different.
It's debate.
Seriously.
It's debate club. A lot of it is being on that Senate floor, and each senator takes it in turn to explain why they want a certain thing to happen. It could be building a great work. It could be something to do with fortifications and defence. It could be something financial. Moving money about. Yeah. There's hundreds of things it could be. But they declare what they want, and then other senators have a time to the question and answer session. And then it moves to a vote, and if the vote passes...
Couldn't pay me. Nope.
So Jocelyn had a 100% success record before she died. She put forward 2 motions, both passed.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then, at the last event, she had...
No spoilers!
We've mentioned it plenty of times. She died. I won't...
The amount of times you said was.
Was, yeah. I think because it's an ongoing investigation, I'm not going to say much about how it happened, but it was her last event. She is no more.
She's gone into the labyrinth.
So that's kind of her main arc. She's had some sort of subplots going on, and the main subplot really for her is that she came back from the Barrens. She'd spent those 10 years desperately hanging on because of wanting to see her husband again. Got back to her husband to find that he was also a very changed person in those 10 years.
He'd moved on and was trying to date a Varushkin.
That Varushkin!
Oh, man, that was fun roleplay. I really enjoyed that game.
And
the practical song will always make me happy.
the 2 or 3 events, she was desperately trying to kind of make things the way they were before, and then kind of finally reached a realisation that that was never going to happen, and they kind of... I'm not sure they ever fully made their peace on it, but I think they came...
Yeah-ish.
They did talk about it, agreed to go their separate ways, to be friends, but not romantically connected. And then Jocelyn fell in love again with someone who was incredibly inappropriate in a number of ways. I think Georgia mentioned earlier that there's this class system in Dawn. You have the nobles and the yo-folk, and nobles can love nobles, and yo-folk can love yo-folk, and that's fine.
But nobles and yo-folk...
They should never cross. And if they do cross... it's not that on its own isn't the issue. It's the fact that the yo-folk should at least be looking to become noble, and an acceptance that nothing actually happens between you until you are both noble and married. And also, marriage is for life in Dawn, so that was a big thing as
no
well.
Divorce.
That if you do decide, as Jocelyn and Clarence did, to just be friends, there is no divorce. You can't be divorced.
They are still married.
Still married, and the assumption is that you live chaste, separate lives, and you don't then go and take on other lovers.
You then don't go and sleep with the yo-folk.
And then Jocelyn fell in love with the yo-folk.
Which is, if we remember Clarence's backstory.
He gave up on his first love because she was not going to become a noble. So we had a few events.
Irony.
A few very fun events. We had one event where it was very sneaky and trying not to let anyone find out that she'd started having relations with this yo-folk, and then that didn't last very long. Jay got found out pretty easily. A couple of events of them sort of flaunting the traditions of Dawn quite openly.
Oh, yeah.
And then it all ended in a classic Dawnish Romeo and Juliet style ending. Last event, so my character died, and then my friend James, who played Peter, the yo-folk in question, slit his throat.
Yeah, she slit his own
He was
throat.
left alone for 1 minute.
With Clarence, and then slit his own throat.
How did it happen? He fell. He fell.
Repeatedly.
He fell on his knife. Who was the last person to touch that knife, Clarence?
I couldn't tell you.
Well,
Clarence.
Jocelyn. I mean, I think you were saying about who was Clarence, and you said Ron Weasley. She was very much... The two that I've heard a lot is... And if anyone out there watches the BBC version of Musketeers, Queen Anne from that was always one of her key inspirations. And there's quite a bit of Daenerys Targaryen, I'd say,
definitely
in there.
from
The political side of
stuff.
her. Very much the, I don't like things the way they are, I'm not going to stand for it.
Yeah.
I'm not. There's that quote from Daenerys that, I'm not going to change the wheel, I'm going to break the wheel. Which is, I use that as an inspiration quite a lot when I had Jocelyn in the political arena. Yeah. Definitely a bit of Hermione Granger in there as well. There's a bit of a melting pot of...
From what we were talking about a minute ago, though, which brings on something quite nice, is it will give you like a rundown of what the nation is and what the nation isn't.
Yeah.
So Dawn is like...
They are not honourable.
Yes, and you're not chivalrous.
Yeah.
It's like the two key things.
So there's, glory, but they are not... Yeah. They don't treat... Men and women are not treated differently. There is no... Yeah. Chivalry isn't expected of you.
And it's... means to an end. It's not... ends to mean, sorry. So it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's if you...
It's something like proud in victory, glorious in defeat, I think is the quote. So it's better to lose gloriously than to win in a sort of conniving-y, backstabbing-y type of way.
Rubbishy way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about the challenge.
Wearing your heart on your sleeve as well is a big Dawnish thing.
Romance and sort of romantic tragedy is a very big Dawnish.
So what I did with Clarence was picked the things that he was very good at, but then also picked something from that he wasn't very good at. So when we were talking about the history, that we wouldn't know all of history, Clarence, for example, he wasn't very good at the heart on your sleeve. because he wanted to protect people. He also wanted to protect people from the troubles that he was causing.
Yeah.
So one of the sayings I really liked with Clarence, which I didn't use too often, because he'd always been told not to use it, which is a problem shared is a problem doubled. And he was the sort of same in love, that he didn't want to burden. He had his kind of Dornish ideals of what he was doing, but he then didn't want to burden these other people with them because he wanted to try and keep them safe. So he's completely wrong. Completely wrong.
But he thinks that he's doing the right thing.
He thinks he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Which is the key. Excellent. Should we move on? We've done the most important character.
The even more most important character.
Now we're getting on to the rising star of Dawn. And the prettiest character. So I play the significantly younger character compared to two of yours. Yeah. And the only lineaged character, the only naturally lineaged character out of the three of us. So I play Lady Aurelia Devereux. So she is part of House Devereux, which are very close to Cordraco. When it came to making Aurelia, I think, same as Kat, I was quite lucky that there was already a bit of background laid out. So the House of Devereux was already established. And essentially my friend came and found me. She was like, oh, do you want to come play Empire? We've got like 10 sibling slots to fill because the Devereux are renowned in Dawn for having so many blood-related siblings. So I was like, yeah, you know what? And I filled in the slot for the second youngest child. And all I knew from our background was that Devereux had sort of been out of the spotlight for quite a while because the current Earl was extremely paranoid and extremely scared of his children getting hurt to the point of over-controlling them. So it was a tiny bit of background, but enough for me to establish something. And then from there, I think, because I'm I'm an ambitious role player, I like playing, I always end up drawn to the characters that require really difficult phys reps. So I went looking through these lineages because I really wanted to play one, and I just instantly got drawn to the idea of the Cambion, about these politically savvy, competitive, quite cool characters.
Very confident.
Quite social. And I sort of went, okay, I know I want a female character and she's gonna be a Cambion. And then I then started thinking, what kind of character do I want her to be? And I thought, well, Cambion, political, she's going to be a politically driven character. And then instantly my mind went straight to Marjorie Tyrell from Game of Thrones, instantly. Because in previous LARPs I've been playing sort of quite burly, quite aggressive characters, very into combat. And this time I was like, no, you know what, I really want to play a really feminine character. I want to be like all in the dresses, and Marjorie was just the inspiration for that. Really overly friendly and flirty, but she's an absolute snake. Like, she's got that snakiness too high. I dialed down the snakiness a bit with Aurelia, so she's not deceitful, but she is definitely savvy with the political stuff. She knows who to talk to, who not to talk to, what you tell people, what you don't, and what things to listen out for. So that was how she came into being. And it took me a while to come and play her, though. I had the idea for her for about a year, but I wanted to make sure that when she came in, she had an impact, because especially in terms of kit and costume, because I didn't want to come in with substandard kit.
Empire is... The kit levels are...
It inspires you to want to up your kit game.
A lot of it's better than TV shows.
Oh yeah, definitely. The amount of money people spend on it, and they're beautiful outfits, like whether it's dresses or armour or just the everyday wear, it's absolutely beautiful, some of the stuff people wear. So I waited until I gathered a bit more money. Obviously I had to consider the phys reps as well for the Cambion. I had to get these horns. And I knew that I wanted Aurelia to be quite heavily lineaged. I didn't want her to just have these little bitty horns. I wanted her to have big, magnificent gold horns. They were quite expensive, and I was at university at the time, so I couldn't justify spending £50, £75 on these horns. So I decided to make them for my first event, which was the ball.
Where we met.
So that was my first appearance. And I made these horns out of, I think it was floristry wire, paper mache, gold spray paint, and masking tape. And they came out quite well, actually.
Awesome.
They lasted a whole year. I wore them into battle. It was only at E4 last year.
And you had it cleaved off.
That they got
completely
cleaved off, and I went, well, that's those horns done. The backstory for Aurelia just sort of built up as I went on. So I like to write a lot of fic for my characters, and I think it really helps me get into them better.
I've never done fiction before. I'd never written, and then
done a few now.
I've done a few, and it made me think about my character a lot more.
It does.
I didn't do much either, and then once you start, you can't stop.
Yeah, and I came from, as I said, a tech-based sort of role-play background, so for me that's kind of more second nature than the Larp in a way. Like that's what I'm used to doing.
It can help to open up things that people don't see on the field, so you can have this other side to your character that you explore that not necessarily everyone's going to see. But the main part of Aurelia's backstory was her relationship with her father. So Earl Devereux is not a nice man. He is a horrendous man. He is a horrendous father.
Clarence loves him.
Clarence loves him.
Jocelyn does not.
Jocelyn does not. That's why Jocelyn became surrogate mother.
Sorry.
But the whole idea was that the controlling aspect started getting more and more. It started getting suffocating, and then Aurelia reached an age sort of 11, 12, where she sort of got sick of it and she wanted to have a bit more freedom. And for the first ever time, her father hit her, and that was a key thing in her backstory. The fact she's got this just livid hatred for her father, but she's so lovely to everybody else. So she will, if her father's like in her path, she will just walk straight past him. She doesn't even call him dad. She calls him by his first name because she just completely dissociates from him. And another key part to Aurelia's backstory, which again cropped up having been in play, was the backstory with Tristan.
Yeah.
So there's another character in our house who was a ward. So he was sort of when we say ward, he was kind of a hostage. So the Devereux were having problems with a bandit clan, and they brokered a peace. And part of that piece was that one of their sons would come and live with them and be raised alongside his children. And she hated him at first, they absolutely hated each other, and then as they got older, like they started entering this romantic relationship, which completely collapsed because he became a noble, she was still a yo-folk. Then she did her test of metal, and they were in the same house, which is a no-no. You can't be with someone in the same house, it's considered
incest.
Worse than incest, but incest is okay. If you're in different houses,
then
you can
incest
sleep
is
with your
fine.
brother. But if you're in the same house, even if you aren't blood related, you cannot be with them because you are house brothers and house sisters.
Yeah.
So, and then when Aurelia did her test of metal, she was sort of given an ultimatum, and she decided to go her own way. So she was still part of the house, but she sort of, very similar to Jocelyn, went her own way. And when she came in at the Sardos Ball, she'd sort of been away for about a year, doing her own thing, doing a bit of exploring. And and then I think with the not knowing stuff, that was quite good with Devereux as well, because the house had been quite reclusive for a few years. Yeah. It made sense that the younger generation, so Aurelia's brothers and sisters, weren't very well educated in the ways of the world. So, and it gave her a nice platform to then learn and sort of latch herself onto people to sort of educate her, and she's now made a note. She's sort of
having that Earl figure as well.
So she's got her eyes on that Earl ship now. She's got her eyes on it. She's done with Uther now.
Oh, I so want you to talk Clarence round. I really want that conversation to happen.
Hey, you realise my dad hits me, Clarence?
No, I don't believe that.
Of course not. He's such a nice old man.
Stand up, chap.
Definitely not. But
Just spinning in a grave.
yeah, Aurelia is. It took me a while to get her exactly where I want her, and I think that's the same with a lot of characters. You come in with one idea and you never really stick to it 100% because things happen, you react to situations, and you go in different paths that you didn't think. Like you said with Jocelyn, you came in wanting to go down the physical path.
Jocelyn's story is almost nothing like my first intention.
Clarence changed horrendously. He really changed a lot.
Aurelia's, in terms of combat, I was going to have Aurelia really, really, like, not that combat heavy, and she's now she's a war mage now, so she's literally, like, just behind the front lines. So that was a nice little turn, and that was something that was also in the backstory, that the Devereux siblings weren't really allowed to do heavy combat training because they might get hurt. So they did a lot of, like, secret practices. And Aurelia's test of metal, that was something that sort of I didn't really know what to do with. So I had to sit down with someone else in the house. So Alessa, who plays Aurelia's younger sister, sat down with her and sort of she went through different kinds of tests that she had heard about. She went over her character's test, and we finally came up with something that sounded right for the character. So, and it was, again, similar to how it went down with Jocelyn. She went up to Uther. She'd been pestering him for this test for years, like since she was, I think she was like 16, 17, and then she reached 18. She went, "You are going to set me a test now." And he went, "Fine, all right." And his whole idea was that, so the test he set with her was to go and infiltrate one of these bandit clans that they had trouble with for so long and take them down without the use of her magic. So his whole plan was that she would fail, and that she'd come crying home like the little girl he thought that she was. And she'd be like, "Oh, Father, I never want to go out in the outside world again, just please keep me safe and buy me things." And she went, "No, you're right." And she knew that was what he wanted her to do, so she completely played on it. She ran out into the woods and collapsed and was crying and was like, "Oh, I'm so lost. And these bandits found her, and they recognised, like, she was one of the Devereux, and so they took her to where they were camped out to basically ransom her off. And they, she kept playing this, like, scared little girl thing, and they left her alone in a room with a lit candle. And she just went around flicking these candles over and just set the entire camp on fire, and then walked back, like, ash on her cheeks, walked back and was just like, "I've done what you asked." And that was when she was given this ultimatum that she could, if she could either stay or go. That was what she was told. She could either stay and not be allowed to leave again, or she could go and not come back. And she chose to go. And that broke Tristan's heart.
Oh,
yeah, poor Tristan, that broke his heart. But he didn't keep that promise for long. I think just at the end of last year, we had a little player event where she was finally invited back home and seeing her father again for the first time in nearly 2 years actually. And that was tense.
And
that was very tense.
Now she wants to be a villain and take over the house.
Definitely. But I mean, her boyfriend's died.
Everyone's dying.
Everyone she loves keeps dying. So yeah, one other thing I didn't foresee for Aurelia was the romance aspect. I already knew that she was going to be, like, really flirty, and that was really fun to play. And then having met Max Cordraco, which is part of House Cordraco, who was the heir, I then got a message from the player saying, "Hey, we've just been sort of discussing something. Would you like to do a romance thing between Max and Aurelia?" And it actually turned out to be something quite lovely. It was a really nice romance. Yeah. It was the first time I'd ever done, other than with my own boyfriend, it was the first time I'd ever done a romance plot in a LARP. And it can be quite You've got to set out ground rules.
You've got to be careful.
You've got to be careful because
you
play falling in love with someone, and then sometimes your brain gets a bit confused and it's like, oh, we're falling in love with the person. You're like, no, character, not the person. And yeah, there was this really beautiful love story that just came out, and they were finally getting around to getting a test of ardor set so they could get married. Uther took his sweet time setting one, and then her fiance died in her arms at a ball. So they had their last dance together. They were dancing together. It was really romantic.
And then he just scream of my name across the dance floor.
He just collapsed, and Aurelia just screaming for Jocelyn because physic, and also because like mother figure.
Yeah.
And yeah, he just died there and then. And then we get to the next summit, and 4 more people die.
All the people died.
So Aurelia's not doing okay right now because the part of her wants her to just like, give up and like, everyone just keeps dying. I don't want to live anymore. But then the Cambion part of her, which is really cold and logical, is keeping her going. But to the point where it might be causing her more problems than it is helping her. Because lineaged people, there is always a risk of something called lineage madness, where whatever lineage you are becomes
uncontrollable.
It just takes over. And for changelings, it's like rage. They are so angry all the time. They believe that they are the best at everything and everyone should worship them. I think Draugr become really paranoid. Cambion, I think it's quite terrifying. Cambion become controlling. They believe that they know everything, and then everyone has to listen to what they say, and if they don't, then they'll just get rid of them. So it's definitely a case of, oh no, I know best.
Yeah.
And I think that's a worry for Aurelia because she doesn't want to end up like Uther. Yeah. She doesn't want to end up controlling people.
I'm not sure whether we actually explained lineages at the beginning. So there's the 6 magical realms, which we mentioned earlier, and each of them kind of has this way of touching people of the Empire, so that you're born, or it can come on in later life.
Yeah, you have different either physical or personality traits that come through. And some Dawn in particular, I remember reading Dawn believe that lineage gives you an advantage.
Yeah.
So sometimes lineage people will be given tests that are slightly more difficult because it can be seen as as advantageous.
There's a set of personality traits that go along with each one, which are kind of unchangeable. So whereas a normal, I don't want to say a normal human because lineage people are humans, but someone non-lineage could learn to maybe calm their impulsiveness or that kind of, where you change your personality to a degree.
Whereas a changeling, they are always impulsive.
Yeah, it's like the colour of your hair, the colour of your eyes, it's just part of you. And it's those kind of traits that come out in the madness.
Yeah, and Cambion, like, some of their normal personality traits are they're competitive, they really like politics, they like competition, and they like conversation, but then when the madness starts to take over, it's the need to control people, that they see everyone as just these pieces on a chessboard that they can move. And sometimes it's because, I know best. And other times it is because they genuinely they believe that if they don't control people, they will not be safe. And that is definitely what's going through Aurelia's mind at the minute, that if she doesn't control people, that they're just going to keep dying. So, and it's something she's trying her best to fight against, but that's definitely something that's going to get explored in later games with her.
Lineage madness was something that I was always intending to play on with Jocelyn, because she was a physic, she was going to start looking into that in a sort of medical sense, and I might now do that with a future character because it never went off the ground with Jocelyn. I might at some point in the future play a different physic character who's focused this very much on lineage madness, because I think that is a really interesting part of the game.